Speak Student!
Beowulf a la Shmoop, an introduction.
And welcome to Beowulf a la Shmoop. Here we go. What we gardina in gargnum, bjodginstium trim gefrunon, who do aplingus ellen fremendum. And that was not Klingon, that was actually English in the era of Beowulf. And good luck spelling all that. So we're here with Dr. Deb talking about this. Beowulf's considered the first great work of literature written in the English language, and that was the English language, not Klingon. But you'll notice pretty quickly, this is not the English we use today. It's Old English, which is just bizarre stuff. But Deb, so why don't you give us a context of the era and what we should expect from a reading of Beowulf and why you need Shmoop so badly when you do read Beowulf?
Sure. Well, I mean, the first thing you mentioned is it's written in Old English. And just to kind of give a little background on what that means, before the Norman conquest in 1066, we were not speaking an English that sounds anything like it sounds today. The Norman conquest brought in a lot of like Frenchiness into the language. So Old English is very Germanic. So it has German, like Latin, Norse, like Scandinavian sounds in it. So yeah, it basically sounds like someone is sneezing.
And for those of us who missed school that day, the Norman conquest is the Nordic tribes coming down, basically taking over what's now England. And that was and then King William emerged from that.
Yeah, and this all happened in 1066, so we'll talk a little bit about how Beowulf is really centered right in the middle of that, because Beowulf was told before the Norman conquest, but then it was written down after. So we'll talk a little bit about that play, but the historical context is important to keep in mind as we read.
Great. Tell us a little bit about a day in the life of, because just living in this era feels like it's an important element of the story and the context of things. Like, what was a day in the life?
What we want to remember is that Beowulf is an epic poem. So it really isn't about the day in the life. It's about a day in the life of someone incredibly important. Epic poems tend to be about big, heroic rulers. And this is, an epic poem at its best. It's about heroism. It's about really showing the cultural values of the ruling class. It's written in an elevated style. There's supernatural things going on. And through all this, we're able to see what was most important to the people who were telling the story. So, when you read Beowulf, you don't really get the idea of like what a day in the life was for Joe Schmo in the 5th century, or the 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th century when it was written. But instead, you get a day in the life of a hero who fights monsters. So it's a little different.
What can we expect from a reading of Beowulf? What's the historical context of Old English? How did the English language change after the Norman conquest? Is Beowulf a day-in-the-life story? Why or why not?
And that was the English language, not Klingon.